since then I am now apparently telling people about my crazy hyperfixation on whether or not Degas could have been Jack the Ripper, I need to provide receipts. You are first encountering information, you need to always ask for citations. And so in order to set a good example, I'm going to provide some for you now. First, I need to start with the serial killer gray matter dead zone in the brain and Stargardt's disease causing a similar gray matter dead zone. That is necessary that I give you those citations because I have already told you about that and I should have provided them at the time. James Fallon of UC Irvine wrote this book, The Psychopath Inside, and he also did a TED Talk about the dead spot in people's brains when they are serial killers, psychopaths, or sometimes just regular people. In order for people with this dead zone, it should be noted, to have problems with psychopathy and killing, they have to have a trigger event or a terrible childhood or have some sort of pre-existing problem. So I want to be clear that not everybody whose brain looks like this is going to be a killer, because there are going to be many people who have this dead zone. But it is true that everybody who is a serial killer has the dead zone. So not all brains like this, but yes, all serial killers. So here's an NPR interview that talks a lot about the position of this dead zone, which is important because, as I mentioned, Degas started going blind from a hereditary disease that we now think is most likely Stargardt's disease. There's no real way to tell. Now, I should note that they have tested his remaining relatives for evidence of Stargardt's disease, but Stargardt's is a rare disease even when it is genetic, and he has no direct descendants. So if they had found that any of them had Stargardt's, it would be likely that he had Stargardt's, but not finding it didn't tell us much, actually, unfortunately. Now, here is an article in a 2015 a journal about eyes, and it's cerebral involvement in Stargardt's disease. So they found 18 people who had been diagnosed and showed all the clinical symptoms of Stargardt's disease, and then they took 23 people who had, quote, normal vision, and ran them through a battery of tests. And the results were that they found significant gray matter loss bilaterally in the occipital cortices, extending into the precuneus and the frontoorbital cortices, which are the same segments that Fallon talks about. And again, I want to stress that not everybody who gets damage to that part of the brain is going to end up a serial killer or even a psychopath. They could be totally normal. The brain is weird. We don't completely understand how it works. So don't go being scared of people with Stargardt's disease. That's not fair. If I'm honest, most of what I'm going to tell you about Degas will come from a single author, Theodore Reff, but that is because he's the preeminent scholar, in my opinion, of him, and I can trust his research. He is professor emeritus at Columbia University, and he is an academic beast. When you're talking about breadth and depth of knowledge, he is the Hoover Dam. He is a power creator. He is electric. He's also 94 years old, so the amount of stuff he's written is astounding. I don't own a copy of his magnum opus, which is definitely the letters of Edgar Degas, but unfortunately, it's too expensive. I can't afford it. I do have his notebooks of Edgar Degas, and I've already shown you some photos of those in my video. So you can see it's faithful reproductions of the notebooks that Edgar kept for years and years. Unfortunately, not all the way through till when the murder started. He stopped writing, or at least we don't have any journals from that era. Reff also wrote Degas, The Artist's Mind. I've talked a little bit about this book already. It is fantastic. It's a really great read. I will also be referencing these three books. Definitely The Sculpture of Edgar Degas by Millard. These books are high quality. Unfortunately, when it comes to resources on Jack the Ripper, I have to be much more selective and discerning because there is so much out there about him that is just made up. It's sensationalist, and it's trash. If you only buy one book, buy the Jack the Ripper Companion, which is just an encyclopedia of actual print and scans of primary resources. It has all of the transcripts that exist from Scott's files. It has all of the newspaper clippings of the time. It has illustrations from the era. It is just a great resource for primary documents. When you're researching something this sensationalist and this old, you definitely want to try and find documents from the era, and preferably written by the people themselves involved. Now, with a murder that has been unsolved, that becomes a lot more difficult, obviously. This one came recommended to me, and I haven't cited it yet, but I'm enjoying looking through it and reading it a little bit. I don't know if I'll use it or not, but I'm going to show you that I have it. I will definitely be talking about this because Patricia Cornwell suggested that Walter Sickert was the murderer. I could not avoid talking about this book if I tried, because Degas and Walter Sickert were definitely, they were good acquaintances, let's say it that way, because while Degas probably didn't respect Sickert too much, Sickert was definitely another artist in his circle, because Sickert was the protege for a while of Whistler, as in Whistler's mother, and Degas and Whistler were slightly rivals, slightly friends. In fact, the first chapter of this book is all about the friendship between Whistler and Degas. And though Walter Sickert isn't the biggest name in art, definitely not on par with Whistler or Degas, he comes up a lot whenever you read about Degas, and now whenever you read about Jack the Ripper. And I do need to give Patricia Cornwell credit where credit is due. Some of the things that make Degas an excellent suspect for the Jack the Ripper murders are true of all artists, and therefore are also true of Walter Sickert. And in the case of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes' murders, the night of the double murder, there were two suspects that night, and for all I know, Sickert and Degas could have collaborated in the murders. If you do decide to read Patricia Cornwell's books on Jack the Ripper, I would like to warn you that she has inserted sexual content into the murders, so it needs an additional content warning on top of, just the regular violence. There's also essay, so keep that in mind. It was a nasty surprise as I was reading it. And if you're wondering how I keep track of all of this information, well, I use a modified version of the Robert Greene Ryan Holiday note card system, modified for ADHD. Putting my note cards in a container like this does me zero good because of object permanence problems. So instead I stick them in a binder where I can review multiples of them at once, and sort of try and keep it to topics. I hope you found that useful or interesting, and I think my next video is probably going to be on why being an artist in particular at the time would make you an excellent candidate for being Jack the Ripper.